What happens when a city you helped build slowly begins to question your place in it? And more importantly, can power, wealth, influence, and years of success truly protect someone when loyalty starts fading and old wounds refuse to heal? That is the question hanging over Memphis right now. Because recently, Key Glock made a statement that felt bigger than rap, bigger than social media, and bigger than one personal dispute. He made it clear, without hesitation, that Yo Gotti is no longer welcome in Memphis. Pause and think about that. A man who spent years building his name, his business, and his empire around that city is now being told he no longer belongs there. How does something like that happen? How does someone go from hometown icon to controversial figure in the very streets that once celebrated him? This is not simply a story about two rappers trading words. It is about pride, legacy, betrayal, loyalty, and a rivalry that stretched across more than a decade. It is about a city divided by alliances, grief, unanswered questions, and memories that never fully disappeared. To understand the present, we have to return to the beginning. Memphis has always moved differently in hip-hop. The city's music carries pain, confidence, survival, and authenticity. In Memphis, reputation is not just marketing, it is identity. Respect matters deeply. Allegiances matter even more. And once sides are chosen, people rarely forget. By 2014, Yo Gotti had already become one of the most powerful names connected to Memphis rap. He was not just making hit records. He was building infrastructure. His label, CMG, was growing. Industry relationships were strong. Money was flowing. New artists wanted access. To many people, Gotti represented success at the highest level. He looked untouchable. Then young Dolph's rise became impossible to ignore. Dolph was doing something that caught people's attention quickly. He was building momentum independently. He moved with confidence, invested in himself, and created demand without relying on a major machine. That alone made him different. Then came the moment many people still point to as a turning point. Yo Gotti reportedly offered Dolph a deal. On paper, it sounded logical. Why not join forces? Why not combine local power with rising talent? Why not turn competition into partnership? But Dolph said no. And that decision may have meant far more than declining a contract. In another city, it might have been viewed as business. In Memphis, where pride and hierarchy carry real weight, it felt symbolic. Dolph was not just rejecting paperwork. He was rejecting dependence. He was sending a message that he could win without attaching himself to the city's most established gatekeeper. He chose to keep control, build paper route empire, and prove that independence could compete with power. That kind of move earns admiration from some people. From others, it creates resentment. So the tension began. At first, it was subtle. Indirect comments. Competitive energy. Quiet jabs. Industry whispers. Fans choosing sides. Neither camp needing to say everything publicly because the city already understood what was happening. But by 2016, subtlety was fading. Dolph became more open in his music and interviews, hinting at friction with someone who once wanted to sign him. Around the same time, he announced an album title that drew immediate attention, King of Memphis. That title mattered. Yo Gotti had long associated himself with that crown. So what happens when another man steps forward and claims it publicly? Was Dolph simply confident? Was he promoting music? Or was he openly challenging the city's established order? However people interpreted it, the reaction was immediate. Social media became a battlefield. Fans argued daily. Affiliates responded. Diss records emerged. Every lyric was dissected. Every interview was analyzed. Every silence was treated like strategy. What had once been competition was turning into something darker. Then came 2017. And suddenly, this no longer felt like entertainment. Young Dolph survived multiple violent incidents, including a shooting where reports said more than 100 rounds were fired at his vehicle. The fact that he lived shocked many people, especially when it was said the vehicle was armored. Think about what that means. What kind of life requires that level of preparation? What kind of pressure makes survival part of your daily planning? Yet Dolph did not disappear. He leaned into resilience. He turned trauma into music, business, and motivation. Supporters admired his refusal to bend. Critics said the conflict had gone too far. But one thing became clear: this feud was no longer harmless. And while all of this unfolded, another figure was growing in the background. Key Glock. To outsiders, Glock may have first looked like the younger artist coming up under Dolph. But to those paying attention, he was becoming much more than that. He was family. He was trusted. He was learning the business, the streets, and the emotional cost of conflict from close range. Raised through hardship, Glock developed toughness early. When he entered Paper Route Empire, he did not simply borrow Dolph's shine. He built his own fanbase, his own sound, and his own identity. That is important, because artists who only depend on cosigns often fade when the spotlight changes. Glock did the opposite. He grew stronger. But imagine what he was also absorbing during those years. He was watching tension harden into hatred, watching success attract danger, watching loyalty tested repeatedly, watching someone close to him carry the weight of being targeted. What does that do to a young man's memory? What does it teach him about trust? Then came November 2021, a day that still feels heavy in Memphis. Young Dolph was shot and killed in broad daylight while visiting a local business. The news spread instantly. Shock turned into grief. Grief turned into anger. Fans mourned worldwide, but in Memphis, the loss felt deeply personal. Many saw Dolph as more than a rapper. He represented independence, generosity, and proof that success could be built without surrendering ownership. For Key Glock, it was devastating. This was not just an artist losing a mentor. This was family losing family. He stepped back from the public eye. Social media activity vanished. Silence replaced visibility. And silence often says more than words. How does someone process grief when the entire world is watching? How do you mourn privately when the loss happened publicly? How do you trust anyone when the person you loved was taken so suddenly? Over time, arrests were made. Trials developed. Testimony surfaced. Names circulated. Connections were debated. The public searched for answers. Yet even as legal steps moved forward, uncertainty remained. Who knew what? Who planned what? Who benefited? Was every responsible person held accountable? Or did the truth become buried beneath fear, loyalty, and incomplete evidence? Those questions lingered because closure never felt complete. And in situations like this, unresolved pain does not disappear. It waits. Then, in 2024, another major tragedy shook Memphis. Anthony "Big Juke" Mims, Yo Gotti's brother, was killed. Again, it was sudden. Again, it was public. Again, it intensified conversation around cycles of retaliation, consequences, and the dangerous cost of long-standing conflict. People began asking uncomfortable questions. Had years of tension created a point of no return? Was anyone truly winning anymore? How many families had to grieve before the culture admitted something was broken? Through all of this, Yo Gotti's public image remained complicated. To supporters, he was still a businessman who built opportunity, expanded his label, and brought national attention to Memphis talent. To critics, he represented power mixed with controversy, a man whose success could never fully separate itself from the shadows surrounding old rivalries. And now Key Glock has added new weight to that divide. When Glock says Gotti is not welcome in Memphis, it resonates because Glock is not speaking as a random commentator. He is speaking as someone tied emotionally and historically to everything that happened. He represents the side of the city that still mourns Dolph. He represents loyalty that did not fade after death. He represents younger voices who inherited old wounds. So when he speaks, many listen. But what does "not welcome" truly mean? Is it a warning? A symbolic rejection? A statement about public perception? Or a sign that some divisions in Memphis have only grown stronger with time? That is where this story becomes larger than rap. Because cities remember. Neighborhoods remember. Families remember. Fans remember. Success can buy security, headlines, and influence. But can it erase memory? Can money repair trust once broken? Can legacy survive if too many people feel betrayed by it? Memphis now stands at a crossroads shaped by those questions. One path continues the old cycle: pride, retaliation, division, endless tension. The other path would require something far harder: truth, accountability, healing, and the willingness to let old wars end. But are people ready for that? Can a culture built on strength embrace peace without seeing it as weakness? Can rivals ever coexist after years of bloodshed and blame? Can the next generation choose something different from the one before it? No one knows yet. What is clear now is this: the story has grown far beyond charts, sales numbers, platinum plaques, luxury chains, or old rap rivalries that once dominated headlines. Those things may have started the conversation, but they no longer define it. Now, the story is about what remains after the noise fades. It is about who is still standing when the crowds leave, when the cameras stop flashing, and when the music no longer drowns out the pain. It is about grief that turned into identity. It is about wounds that never fully healed. It is about a city trying to move forward while carrying the full weight of everything behind it. Memphis has always been a place built on strength, hustle, pride, and survival. Its music carries raw emotion because the city itself carries raw emotion. Every beat, every lyric, every anthem often feels connected to real struggle, real ambition, and real scars. That authenticity made the city respected worldwide. But authenticity also means the pain is real when conflict grows beyond entertainment. And perhaps the biggest question of all is this: when Memphis looks back at this era years from now, what will it remember most? Will it remember power or pain? Will it remember dominance or division? Will it remember success stories or opportunities lost? Will it remember the rise of stars or the fallouts that overshadowed them? The answer is still being written. And that is what makes the moment so heavy. Because right now, nobody can say with certainty how history will judge these years. Sometimes people living inside a moment cannot fully understand it until time passes. Sometimes distance reveals truths emotion cannot. So now the question becomes even more serious. Is this retaliation, coincidence, or simply the continuation of a cycle that refuses to end? Because when violence becomes a pattern, it stops being about one person, one name, or one incident. It becomes about something larger. It becomes about a system of unresolved conflict, inherited tension, and repeated choices. That is when a city begins carrying burdens from one generation to the next. Meanwhile, Key Glock returned. But he did not return as the same person people once knew. Loss changes people. Pressure changes people. Responsibility changes people. He came back sharper, more focused, more disciplined, and more determined than before. The energy around him felt different. There was less interest in distractions and more interest in legacy. Less noise. More purpose. His music reflected that transformation. There was pain in the records, but also growth. There was grief, but also strength. There was anger, but also control. There was loyalty, but also maturity. Listeners could hear someone trying to turn tragedy into momentum. They could hear someone refusing to be broken by circumstances. They could hear someone carrying memories while still pushing forward. He continued building paper route empire, honoring Dolph's legacy while establishing his own lane at the same time. That is not an easy balance. How do you respect the past without becoming trapped inside it? How do you carry another person's legacy while also becoming your own person? Those are difficult questions for anyone. Yet Key Glock appeared determined to answer them through action instead of speeches. No distractions. No endless public back and forth. No constant interviews feeding controversy. Just movement. Just work. Just progress. And then came the statement that Yo Gotti is not welcome in Memphis. Those words landed with weight far beyond music. Now pause and think. Was that statement simply personal anger spoken aloud? Was it grief speaking through frustration? Or was it something bigger, a symbol of changing influence, shifting power, and evolving identity within the city itself? Because in cities with deep cultural roots, words often mean more than they appear to mean. Sometimes a statement about one person becomes a statement about an entire era. At the same time, Yo Gotti has remained largely silent. No direct responses. No public confrontations. No loud attempts to restart old narratives. From a business perspective, that makes sense. Why risk legal issues, reputational damage, or unnecessary controversy? Successful people often protect what they built by refusing emotional reactions. But culturally, silence can be interpreted many different ways. Is it maturity? Is it strategy? Is it indifference? Is it calculation? Or does silence create even more speculation because people rush to fill empty space with their own assumptions? That is the danger of public silence in a world addicted to instant reactions. When someone says nothing, everyone else begins speaking for them. Even artists once connected to Gotti's circle have seemed more careful, more distant, more neutral. Some appear unwilling to be dragged into old tensions. Others seem focused on their own careers, unwilling to inherit problems they did not create. And that raises another serious question. When even those closest to you step back, what does that say about the situation? Does it mean wisdom? Does it mean fatigue? Does it mean fear? Or does it simply mean people have learned that some conflicts cost too much to touch? Today, Memphis feels divided, not only by music, but by loyalty, memory, and perspective. Fans often feel pressure to choose sides. Artists feel pressure to declare allegiance. Communities feel pressure to defend names, neighborhoods, or histories. Even new artists, young talents trying to build something fresh, sometimes face scrutiny over old affiliations, past photos, or statements they never meant to become political. Imagine being a new artist with dreams of success, only to discover you must navigate battles that began before your career even started. What kind of burden is that? So where does that leave the city? And more importantly, where does it go from here? Because this is no longer just about two individuals. It is about a culture shaped by years of tension, competition, pride, and unresolved conflict. It is about what happens when business rivalries become personal, and personal rivalries become public identity. It is about a generation of artists trying to move forward while carrying the emotional weight of what came before them. And it is about whether success can exist without division. Can multiple powerful figures thrive in the same city without turning ambition into war? Can competition remain healthy instead of destructive? Can respect exist without surrender? These are not small questions. They matter because they determine whether future talent rises in peace or in chaos. Key Glock represents one path: independence, loyalty, resilience built through loss. A figure shaped by pain but refusing collapse. To many supporters, he symbolizes standing firm, protecting legacy, and proving that hardship does not have to end a story. Yo Gotti represents another path: structure, business growth, corporate expansion, long-term industry influence. He symbolizes building systems, creating scale, and turning street credibility into executive power. Neither path is simple. Neither path came without sacrifice. Neither path is free from criticism. And neither path is without consequence. That is what makes the story complicated. It is easier when one side is purely right and the other purely wrong. Real life rarely works that way. Real life is layered. People build greatness while making mistakes. People achieve success while carrying flaws. People become symbols even when they are still human. But the real question remains this: can Memphis evolve beyond this conflict? Can the city keep its authenticity without keeping its grudges? Can it honor the past without being imprisoned by it? Can new leaders emerge without repeating old patterns? Or will the cycle continue, changing names but staying the same underneath? Because history has shown something important again and again. Every major conflict often begins with one small decision, one misunderstanding, one rejection, one ego wound, one moment nobody thought would matter later. In this case, many trace the roots back to a rejected deal in 2014. One no. A single refusal. Something that may have seemed ordinary at the time. Yet years later, people look back and wonder whether that moment became the spark for tension, competition, resentment, and tragedy. That is how life works sometimes. Small moments create long shadows. So now, as things stand today, we are left with more questions than answers. Is Key Glock justified in drawing that line? Was it necessary to protect boundaries and principles? Or does drawing lines only deepen walls already standing? Can Yo Gotti ever return to Memphis in the same way? Can public perception be repaired once narratives harden? Can influence survive when trust changes? And most importantly, what would it actually take for the cycle to end? Would it take dialogue? Would it take accountability? Would it take time? Would it take a new generation refusing to inherit old battles? Would it take the city deciding progress matters more than pride? Because at its core, this is not just a story about music. It is about choices. It is about consequences. It is about loyalty. It is about grief. It is about power. It is about ego. It is about silence. It is about the long shadows decisions leave behind. And maybe the deepest lesson here is this. In a world driven by status and pride, people often underestimate the real cost of conflict. They count money. They count wins. They count streams. They count headlines. But they do not always count lost peace. They do not always count broken relationships. They do not always count opportunities that disappeared. They do not always count the young people watching and learning the wrong lessons. Sometimes the biggest losses never appear on paper. So what do you think? Is this finally a turning point? A moment where growth replaces old energy? A moment where Memphis chooses future over feud? Or is this simply another chapter in a story far from over? Another pause before the cycle continues again? Only time can answer that. And until it does, the city keeps moving, carrying pride, pain, memory, and hope all at once.